Hey there, we are gonna look at the command line tool ogrinfo today. This is a tool which you can use for getting information about various vector formats. This is part of the GDAL OGR library, which in general has the purpose of reading, writing and editing all kinds of both vector and raster data. It has many command line tools and ogrinfo is one of them. It can pretty much read any data formats you can imagine. So you can click on the list and can browse through. And we will have a look at the most common formats right now. So I have a directory with some files. And first of all, we will have a look at the shapefiles because that's the format which is still mostly used. And as you probably know, it consists of at least 3 files, or in this case it's 5, and it has one main file, it's the .shp, and the rest of the files are the sidecar files. And with ogrinfo we can just have a look. So I go to the places.shape and now I get the message that the file could be opened, and it contains one layer which is not super interesting, this information, but basically ogrinfo can actually read from many different formats, and many of them can contain many layers, and that's why you always have to specify which layer you actually want to get information about. And in this case, I just type the name of the layer, and then I get actually a lot of information. So this is a points data set with cities all over the world, and with the attribute name, population, and point geometry. But actually, this is kind of too much information, and to get the summary, I have the command line option -so, and there I get the nice summary. So I have the count of the features, then the extent, then the coordinate reference system. In this case, it's the Mercator, and then the names of the attributes and the data types. So let's do the same with the other file. So this is the countries. So I do ogrinfo countries. I have again one layer, and in order to not write all the layer, I can use the command line option -al. And so I get actually also a lot of information about each single feature. And in this case, I even get the geometry for the whole polygon, since it's a polygon layer, which is definitely not human readable. So I again go with the -so option. And yeah, here I see this nice summary, and again extent and coordinate reference system. Yeah, so a pretty good summary about like what's happening in this file. Then very often the shapefiles are living in like one big directory, and OGR can actually use one directory of shapefiles as a kind of single data source. So I can type ogrinfo and then the directory, and I get the overview of all the layers which are inside there. And then I can, for example, go to places and get my summary again. This is quite useful if you have a lot of shapefiles in one folder. All right, then let's continue with another kind of common format. It's the geojson. So I have here the chapters geojson, or JSON in this case, and we can have a look. And it's basically like a file which is a big list, let's say, where all the features are presented with all the attributes and also the coordinates. And ogrinfo can of course read this. Here we have this again the same effect like with the shapefile, only one layer inside there. So I select it with a L, and then I get all my information. And here it's actually interesting that the single features can have a different amount of attributes. So here, for example, I have the GitHub attribute, whereas I don't have it here, for example. And now I have my file on the disk, but actually I can, or ogrinfo can also work with files which are in the internet. So I just search one. So for example, here I have a repository of natural earth data, which is a worldwide data set for making maps or for visualization purposes mainly. And here's a GitHub repository which converted them as geojson, and I can click here on the file I would like to have. So I take these places, and GitHub directly shows the files in the browser, but we actually would like to have the raw data, so we click on raw. Here I can see all the information, and now I copy it, go to my command line, ogrinfo, paste it, and I have only one layer again, so I type minus -il, and I get the information of this whole layer. So in this case, there's actually a lot of attributes, which makes the list of each feature quite long. And of course, I can do this summary only again if I like. So here it's also quite long because of this long list of attributes, but here I can get the information. All right. Then let's continue with the GPX file. So GPX is like a file which you usually use on a GPS device or a mobile phone if you want to track your path, and we can have a look at that. So it looks quite confusing. It's basically an XML file. You can recognize that from all these brackets. And to make it a little bit more understandable, we open it in ogrinfo. And OGR actually splits the whole file into 5 different layers. And the most important ones are typically the tracks. So we can have a look at the tracks, and we only want to have this summary. And basically says 1. So basically we have one line string which contains our track. Or the other important one is typically track routes. So track routes minus SO. Oh, I have a typo somewhere. Track points, of course. Yeah, and so I get the information, 197 points, and my extent and coordinate reference system and all the attributes. All right, so then we go to a format which is relatively new, but it's already quite widespread. It's the geopackage. It's the standard format for QGIS. And in contrast to shapefile, it has many advantages. So for example, you can actually store many layers inside one geopackage, and the column names of each layer is not limited to 10 characters like it is in shapefile. And here I again have this natural earth dataset as a geopackage format, and I open it, and here I get 135 different layers. And if I would like to get information about one, I can just type the name. So land, and then I want the summary only, and here I get all the information like expected. All right, then there is also OpenStreetMap files. So I have them here, and this is .osm.pbf, and pbf is a compression format which is not human readable, and ogrinfo can of course read it and give you some information about it. And here actually OGR splits the OSM file into 5 different layers, and actually here is a kind of problem because the OGR works actually with the simple feature standard, whereas the OpenStreetMap data is not has its own standard, and so basically OGR tries to convert OpenStreetMap data into the simple feature standard and makes this by dividing it up into many layers. And so we can have a look at the points layer, for example. And here I get the information about so it's -1 means it cannot count the features, but it can actually count the extent and give me some information about the coordinate reference system like before. And if I actually would like to have information about all layers, I can simply use this -al, and then I have a list of all my summaries for each layers. All right. Then another common format is the WFS, so the Web Feature Service. It's a standard how to like provide vector data in the internet, and I prepared one already. So here it's the WFS from the city of Salzburg in Austria. And here we have the get capabilities document, which describes what's actually inside there. And in order to view this in OGR, we type ogrinfo and prefix it with WFS. And then we have to wait for a second. This is actually because the data has to be downloaded already. And here we get the information about all the layers. And of course, I can get information about each layer. And yeah, this is actually super useful because yeah, I can just get the information about like all the what's inside there. Actually, I made a typo here. It's not -il. I wanted to have -so. So I can just get the summary here. So 30 features, and this is actually especially useful if you don't have, if you don't want to start up QGIS, then you can just explore the features of this WFS and get an impression. And here it's actually interesting. So it's like it's not this Mercator projection is like a custom local one. So it's also good to know. All right. Then finally, a very common use case is using databases, and in the geo domain, the PostGIS database or the PostgreSQL database is pretty much the standard, or at least in the open source world. And I have a local database here on my computer, so I can go to PG. So this is the prefix for Postgres databases, and then I have to type the connection details, and I called my database my example, and I can see all the layers that are actually in there. So typically when you're accessing a database, it also has it's on a remote server, so you have to actually specify the host URL, then on which port it's running, and your username, your password, and so on. But since I have this database running locally on my computer, it's only it's enough actually to only specify the database name. Yeah, and then I can get information about the layer. Oh yeah, it was an autocomplete error, so it's Freiburg.point -so. And yeah, so I get the information again. Here you can actually see it's like 500,000 of points, and ogrinfo counts them, or it's actually pre-counted, but displays them and gives me all the information. All right, then I'm pretty much finished with all the basic formats. And just to remind you again, ogrinfo is only one program of this whole OGR or GDAL OGR suite. So actually another very important one is OGR to OGR, which makes it possible to actually transform vector data and modify it and like make actually some operations on that.